want to belt as high as this in a healthy way, you're going to want to hear these 3 tips that I'm going to share to you that help me belt in a healthy way without compromising the power of the belt voice. After this video, you're going to be able to develop your belt voice and get awesome comments and praise like this. After teaching for 5 years, the most common mistake that singers make is pushing when they are belting. This is why the belt voice has a stigma to be dangerous when it's really not. The person who is incorrectly pushing their voice is now showing people that's how it's done. But my friends, I just showed you how to belt really high without pushing your voice out. You can hear it, you can see it, and that's what you want to go for. Before we get into the tips, we need to understand why we are pushing in the first place. When we watch our favorite performers sing on stage, whether it's Broadway or commercial pop, it sounds very loud. It sounds like they are projecting their voice forward, and so we assume that's what we need to do with our body and our voice as well. That intense volume and ring is not actually from them pushing their sound forward straight out of their throat. On top of that, they're being great performers. They are showing you and acting out something very pushy. However, that is all an illusion, and that is the art itself. What they're doing inside of their vocal tract is another story. And this leads me to tip number 1, send your sound up. When you produce sound at the vocal folds, we create sound waves, and those sound waves need to travel somewhere. Now just think about that. Where do you think the sound waves should travel to? Should it travel straight out of your throat, or should it travel straight up? What we want to do is lift our soft palate to create this nice high placement for that acoustic energy to touch, reflect off of, and that energy bounces out of your mouth. This is very similar to having a high ceiling in a theater. That sound travels up and then reflects outward. So now you may ask, well, how do I practice lifting the soft palate? My clients ask me this all the time. You have to sit there, bring awareness to that, so activate your soft palate and work on lifting it. All it needs is time and practice. So a good way to practice this is to exhale a letter K to start, like this. K, k, k. You can feel a slight lift of the soft palate. K, k, k. Now add a vowel to that. Ka, ka, ka. How do you know if it is lifted? When the sound you produce is not nasal, that means you're lifting the soft palate. But if your sound is nasal, that means you are dampening your sound and therefore your soft palate is lowered. And now try to sing ka on a pattern just to practice, like this. Ka. Now if I go my soft palate is not lifted. Try that again. Ka. So the more you develop the skill of isolating your soft palate and knowing how to send your sound up and back, you will have a better time belting those higher notes without pushing. And let's do a belting demonstration on how you can practice this, okay? So this is what I would do to practice sending my sound up. First, I'm going to go down a few keys to start in a comfortable range. Otherwise, I'm going to push right away. So let's start here, okay? And I need to go feel. Can you hear that? I'm sending the sound up. If I'm not sending the sound up, it sounds like this. Feel. You can see it in my body as well, right? So when you practice sending your sound up, you will correct your body alignments, and you're going to make sure that the resonance you created from the vocal folds will ring out, just like a bell. And then you go higher from there to practice your soft palate as well as practicing your chord closure. Okay, so let's go higher. Feel. Feel. And your hand gestures can really help you out. Try not to do this when you are practicing, okay? This makes people push their sound forward. And I have to be careful with that as well as a vocal coach, right? When I tell my students to project, I don't want to go, come on, project. I want to go, send your sound up, send it up, okay? All right, where were we? Let's start here again. Feel. Feel. Now I have to be careful with my body. Try not to get your shoulders to be squeezed in like this, right? Practice on your alignment so that you're not hurting other parts of your body and your chin as well, okay? Feel. Okay. Tip number 2, use your twang. Twang is an intentional narrowing of the space above your larynx, and what that is doing for you is compressing your tone, allowing you to project your voice even more, but without increasing your vocal effort. How do you activate the twang? If I talk about the anatomy, to be specific, we are narrowing something called the middle pharyngeal constrictor, but that gets a little too confusing for people. And if you are a vocal coach, let's make it more simple for your singers. So we are going to use something called twang triggers. We're going to use sounds that people can imitate so that we can just naturally activate it. And sometimes certain twangs will work better for others. We just have to explore and figure out which one works best for us. So let me give you a few, okay? So you can do a sheep sound like this. Ba! Ba! Right? You can hear that twang. It should have a sharp and pingy quality in the sound. It is meant to cut through the noise in a loud setting so that you can be heard, okay? All right, so now you can try a goat sound like this. Ma! Ma! A little bit different from the sheep, but slightly similar, right? You can also do a baby crying or a baby whining. Wah! Wah! A lot of people resonate with this one because we've all been babies before, so we can access this memory somewhere in our body, okay? We have the muscles to do this sound. And one more can be this, a hungry kitten. Meow, meow. Now, I would consider that to be a lighter twang if you need that type of twang. So I wouldn't use that twang for a belt, maybe if I need a nice head mix. One thing about the twang, we just don't want to confuse it with nasality, okay? Nasality sounds like this. Wah, wah, wah. The sound is dampened, but if I lift my soft palate, but I activate my twang, it sounds more like this. Wah, wah. Okay? And tip number 3, trust the process. So many times people are rushing the process of developing their belt voice. Due to the internet, everyone wants to be able to do the belt voice in a day. And guess what? You probably can if you worked on strengthening and conditioning your voice to handle this intensity. But if you have not taken the time to build your voice, to explore your voice, to isolate different other structures of the vocal instrument to help you out, you are going to run into trouble. And then you wonder, why can't I belt any higher? Well, this is why, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do. This is what has worked for me and my students. I will take the song down a few keys, and if I need to go down 8 keys, Let's go. And I like to have this belt progress tracker for my students. A visual is a great way to help my students see where they are at and not get discouraged, okay? So if you start lower, maybe that week, that's all you are going to focus on. But what matters to me the most is teaching my students how to set up the belt voice. And I'm going to tell you how to do that right now so that you can start developing your own process and trust that if you stick to this long term and not rush the process, you will get the belt voice that you want without hurting yourself, and you're gonna sound wonderful and full and rich. I don't want you to switch into a head mix and then call that a belt. No, I want you to get a full belt, okay? So the belt setup needs to be in vibrational mode 1. That means chest voice mechanism, and that means singing with thicker, full vibrations. And then from there, you need to understand you have to belt in flow phonation that we talked about in part 1 of this series. Flow phonation just means that your vocal folds are vibrating efficiently. They're not locking up and they're not too loose either, creating a breathy phonation. We want that nice balanced tone even in the belt voice. And then you want to brighten up that sound because a belt is a heightened vocal performance that showcases an emotional climax that usually has this brighter resonance. If you go for a darker resonance, it just wouldn't make sense with the belt voice. So if I try to go does that sound like a belt to you? No. So playing around with your larynx position can really help you with that. And then you want to work on that yell timbre that I've talked about many times. Just make it sound like a skillful yell. Notice how I said skillful, right? I'm not saying you should scream. Yell appropriately, like as if you have someone across the street from you and you are very excited to see them and you go, hey! Okay, that wasn't a scream. That was a nice, refined yell. And next, you want to have some twang in your belt because that is how you are going to boost specific harmonics in your voice that determines your voice quality to be a belt. If it doesn't have some sort of twang in this belt, it could be another voice quality. For example, if I go, that doesn't really have any twang in it. So you, the listener, understand that that wasn't belt. You can call that a head voice quality. You can call that a classical voice quality, whatever it is. Definitely not a belt, right? But if I use my twang, it should sound like this. And now it sounds more like a belt. So that's the belt setup. From there, take your song down a few keys and slowly work your way up. If you need to stay down for 8 keys or 5 keys for an entire month, that's okay. Stay there until you master that, until it feels so comfortable in your body. And then you move on to the next key. This is how you make sure your belting is healthy and safe. And I just showed you that exact process earlier in this video. So you can go back to that to see how I started lower and got higher. All right, that's it for this video. I hope you understand a little bit more on how to develop your belt voice and how to approach your practice as well. It's very simple, right? It's not this overcomplicated formula at all. It's just everyone's different and everyone's progress is different as well. My muscles overall as a human being is different from other singers. I don't have the strongest muscle, right? Even as I work out after giving birth, I'm taking the longest time to lose weight and build muscle. And it's the same for my vocal muscles. However, if I trust the process and I don't rush myself and I give my voice time to take breaks in between, I just need to trust that eventually I will get there. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, maybe not in 6 months, but at some point I may get there. And that's something that a lot of singers just need to trust in themselves more. But sometimes they just don't know how to navigate the belt voice because there's so many different opinions out there on the internet about the belt voice. But if my explanation of the belt voice rings true to you, and my strategy and my process makes sense to you, and it's so simple, right? You can just do this today. You can start this right now, okay? Then I encourage you to explore your voice. Do not limit yourself. Don't ever think that you can't belt any higher, okay? If someone else can do it, and I know a lot of people out there can belt way higher than what I just showed you today, then you can probably do it too. You probably can belt higher than me. Like, I don't know, right? So you don't know until you try. Never limit yourself, and stop flipping to your head voice and then calling it a belt. That's not a belt, my friends. It's not. So here's the formula. Here's the belt setup. Here's the strategy. Free for you. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment on what you learned the most out of this healthy belting series. And if you made any progress with your own voice as well, I would love to know. I would love to hear your stories. It makes me very happy to read up on people's success stories. Okay? Thank you so much for watching. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time.